Hey, welcome to Black Cat. Today, we'll do a quick little comparison video. We'll be talking about the good, the Trijicon SRO, the mid, the Trijicon RMR, and the ugly, the Trijicon RCR. So we'll start with the SRO, or the Specialized Reflex Optic. So this one, it came out in 2019. It is essentially just an optic made by Trijicon specifically for the competition market and to be just a more user-friendly experience compared with the RMR. You have this massive window here, um, as well as they put the battery up on the top there versus the RMR on the bottom. So this optic is probably my favorite pistol optic of all time to shoot with. The huge window compared with the really good glass quality make this a very, very pleasant shooting experience. That big window allows you to pick up that dot under recoil quite well, and the actual hood itself is fairly slim, so you don't really notice it a whole lot compared to some of the other optics out there, specifically for competition. Generally, people will regard the SRO as a less duty-oriented optic. It's in its name, specialized, like it's obviously sacrificed some things to be very good for competition and getting that bigger window. However, if you look at how large that hood is, these are very durable. I know of a few people who carry these, use this as their carry optic. It looks fairly tall. However, due to the rounded edges there, it actually doesn't print very much, just because it sort of hides the edges quite well. Trijicon says that the battery life on this is about 3 years on one of their mid brightness settings. And I think that's interesting due to the RMR and the RCR having like 4+ years each. This one is slightly lower, even though it uses the same emitter and same battery and everything, due to it using a different lens coating. So they have to make the dot brighter, which requires more power. But in turn, 3 years is a lot, and it's pretty convenient just to pop that top little battery cap cover off, swap your batteries out, and you're good to go again. The MSRP for these things, according to Trijicon, is right about $820 on their website, which is a lot. However, you can go online and easily find these for about $550, $560, and they often go on sale, and you can find them quite often for under $500 if you know where to look in the right place. One thing that I should note as well is Trijicon says that they do also have 2 night vision settings for the SRO. I personally have never used this under night vision. However, I believe that this would be an absolutely spectacular optic. You have a very large window, at least relative to other pistol optics. You have that clearer lens compared to the RMR or the RCR, so your light's going to be transmitted through that better. And at least on this specific model, it's a 1 MOA dot, so you can get that very, very precise little dot, not a lot of bloom. Just kind of an interesting little tidbit there that I didn't realize until I looked it up. Next, we're going to talk about the RMR, or the mid. So the original RMR came out in, I believe, let me check my notes, 2009. That is the Type 1 RMR. Here's a Type 2 RMR. These came out in 2017. And these specifically addressed some of the issues that they had with the battery connectors on these. There's a little bit of dot flickering under heavier recoil with them, and the Type 2 essentially fixed that. But this is pretty much the classic pistol red dot. This is essentially the standard. I would almost say that it is the classic red dot. I would compare with this with something like the MP5. You know how like all other subguns and modern PCCs are compared against the MP5. I would say that all modern red dots are pretty much compared against an RMR, and for a good reason. This thing is durable. The specific shape of the shroud there, according to Trijicon, distributes the weight away from the lens, which is the most sensitive part of this, into the actual frame of the optic itself, or the shroud. Same deal with the SRO. You've got a couple night vision settings on here. Personally, I wouldn't be a huge fan of that. I wouldn't necessarily want to use this, especially compared with an SRO, due to that blue lens. I don't know how well that is going to translate there. But it's a fairly blue lens, and that's part of the reason that they get that 4 year battery life out of this, is that contrast between the red and the blue just stands out a little better, so they don't need as much power to get the same brightness, same contrast levels. Some people complain about it, say they notice it. Maybe in low light, I would say I do notice it, like under white light inside of my house. However, out in the outside, turn that brightness up all the way, just kind of blast it up, and you're not going to notice that blue tint whatsoever. One complaint that I do have is a lot of people like to say that the lens on this is a little small. It's not that small, it's just the way that it's set up is kind of inconvenient. So you can sort of see on the front here how the lens goes a little low, especially compared with how high the back where the emitter is on this optic. And what that leads to is you actually don't really get the bottom fifth, or at least maybe even a quarter of your lens itself, and that's why it comes across as being quite small. Kind of a whatever thing. It still is much better than just using iron sights. However, it is something to consider. The other sort of main drawback to this is the battery. A lot of people like to complain about how you have to take the optic off to change your battery. Excuse me. I agree. I think it is inconvenient to take the entire optic off to change the battery. However, with 4 years of battery life, like at least halfway through your brightness settings, mine's generally probably in probably 3/4 of the way up in terms of brightness, and I've had this on. I leave all of these optics on because the battery life is so long, by the way. Leave them on for an entire year, and then I change them every year on my birthday, and never had any of them die on me. So pretty neat. I could probably go 2 years on the current brightness settings, but why tempt fate? MSRP for these is right about $780 according to Trijicon. I think you're smoking crack if you spend that much on an RMR. Usually find these on sites online for about $500-ish, and they often go on sale, and you can get them for pretty low, right around $400. And due to these being so prolific, you can find these used down into the 300s, low 300s easy, and you're not too concerned with them being broken or busted, just because of how durable these are. If you truly wanted just a single red dot to like trust whatever on, just get that pedigree, all the testing. Like I said, they've been using these since late 2000s. It's the official like SOCOM handgun red dot site, if that matters to you. So it has that pedigree, it has that that long sort of track record, plenty of time for a lot of the kinks and all the teething problems to kind of sort themselves out. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's not the gold standard anymore in terms of red dots. However, it is definitely still the standard, I think, that all other red dots are judged against. Last up, we got the Trijicon RCR, or the ruggedized closed reflex sight. As the name suggests, it is a closed emitter, and that's kind of the big deal with this thing here. For all intents and purposes, it is a RMR that they made fully enclosed. You can sort of see the different sort of size. I guess I think that lines up relatively well there. The RCR is big, especially compared with the RMR. It weighs 0.7 ounces heavier, so about a 40% weight increase to get your enclosed optic. And one of the consequences of getting that enclosed optic while still remaining on the RMR footprint is they had to come up with a kind of a funky way to actually mount the optic to your slide itself. So it uses a little screw going down through there, put a pin in the side, and you twist it sideways, and that's how you set that, rather than the sort of top-down screws like a regular RMR would have. So essentially what this is, I mean, it is literally an RMR that is now enclosed. The window size is exactly the same. It feels slightly bigger because you can actually use all of it now, due to it sitting much higher up. Consequence of that, again, is you're going to need taller sights if you want to get your iron sights to be able to, if you still want to use your iron sights with this optic. They've also increased the battery life on these. The RMRs said to be useful. The battery on the RMR is supposed to go for about 4 years. Trijicon on their site says 5 years on their middle brightness setting for this RCR, which is kind of insane to think about. So I'm probably going to push this out to 2 years without changing the battery. keeping it on a relatively high brightness setting, and we'll just see how that goes. One really sort of big thing as well is they fixed the battery issue that a lot of people have with the RMR, and they mount it up on the top here now. What that does is it makes the actual optic itself seem a little chunky up on the top. It's not as clean as the RMR, or especially the SRO. Like it's a big fat sort of box. However, I'll pull up some photos as well real quick. There's a guy who crashed on his motorcycle, and his RCR took a lot of the crash, and it still worked. Trijicon was super excited for them. That crash was probably their best marketing they could possibly ask for the RCR, other than it like getting shot, I guess, and still working. But pretty neat. The main downside with the RCR, I will say, is the price. Trijicon themselves say the MSRP for this is $1,000. You're like that's aimpoint T2 territory. That's an EOTech and a magnifier combo price point. That's like a Vortex Razor LPVO price point. That's kind of crazy. Fortunately, not a lot of people are selling them for that much. I've seen these usually online for about $600-ish. This particular one, I waited for it to go on sale for about $530, and then I got a rebate on it from Trijicon, knocking another 100 off of it. So I got essentially the better RMR for $430, which is right in the RMR Type 2 like price point. That's incredible. So there are some pretty sweet deals out there that you can get these for, and I think that it's honestly worth it. If I had to pick one optic to actually like not only trust my life with, but also enjoy shooting with, I would probably pick the RCR. I like the RMR a lot, and I would trust the RMR a lot, and this just takes all the sort of best parts of the RMR and then fixes the couple little issues that some people had with it, and put it all into one package. It is a little tall. This one specifically is on a Forward Control Designs plate for the Glaucom OS system. Kind of wish I'd just got this milled for an RMR pattern, but you know, whatever, hindsight 2020. Still works great, still presents really well. One thing I will say about all of these optics that is really, really nice, especially nowadays, and especially for the RCR, comparing with other modern enclosed emitters like the SIG Romeo X or the Aimpoint Acro. Those all use torque bits now for adjusting your windage and elevation. You can see here, Trijicon is still sticking with something that you can just slip a coin or part of your brass into to adjust. I think this is awesome. I have annoyed myself and pissed myself off so many times by forgetting a little torque bit whenever I go to the range. If I am trying to zero my Acro or my Romeo X, it kind of ruins like the whole vibe of the entire thing. It just makes it unnecessarily difficult. I know why they do it. It's a much more durable sort of way to do it. But realistically, how often are you going to be adjusting your zero? You should get one good zero, especially with some of these optics where you're not messing with them for a while. You get your one good zero, leave it as is, and you're not too worried about like constantly like damaging or stripping it. So just do a real quick size comparison as well. So we can see sort of the RMR here, and then the SRO here. It's kind of hard to offset them. I would say the SRO is probably a fifth taller than the RMR itself. And then another fairly critical aspect of the RCR or the RMR versus the SRO is the SRO is longer. And you can see, especially on these two Glock slides here, how much closer the front of that SRO lens sits to the breech. I haven't had any issues with it. Allegedly, you can run into some issues with your brass getting stopped by your optic on certain handguns. I haven't noticed it on this Glock here. However, that is a concern. And another thing I will say is the lens gets dirtier because it is so much closer to that ejection point. You're going to get all that extra gunk up on your lens. So I do definitely notice cleaning this more than I do the other optics. However, it's such a pleasant, nice experience. It's whatever. However, that said, The SRO and the RCR are probably about the same height. I would say the RCR is slightly shorter, but just a negligible amount. And then most importantly, it is shorter, so you don't really have to worry about that same issue of getting your lens all messed up like you would with the SRO. One sort of downside though is you can see how recessed that front lens is. Hopefully one of these angles will demonstrate what I'm talking about. And it's a little annoying to actually clean this lens itself. You can easily take like your shirt or something like that and kind of like clean off the bottom half of the lens. However, to actually get properly up into the top and fully clean your lens, you're going to need a Q-tip or something like that. So it's a little annoying, but not a huge deal. The back itself is flat. This is nice because if it's sitting in a holster and you're getting dust and stuff collecting, it's going to collect on top here. And this is really nice to just be able to just, like, take your shirt, rub it off, clean it off super quick because it's all flat on the back there, so easy to clean off. Something like the Acro, it's slightly recessed, not that bad, but it is noticeable. It's a little bit harder to clean off. And then the Sig Romeo X definitely is annoying to clean, especially the back. That was sort of annoying of them to design that, but is what it is. So some closing thoughts real quick. As I mentioned earlier, if I had to pick any one of these optics to like truly trust my life, just put one optic on one gun for the rest of my life, it would be the RCR. You get all of the benefits of the RMR, what make the RMR so good, and then you fix essentially all of the issues, namely that battery, and then also some people having issues with that lens being a little low, and you get it in that sort of modern trend of getting a closed emitter. So that's another thing you don't really have to worry about. That said, the one that I shoot the most is without a doubt the SRO. I think that the SRO is absolutely fantastic and a very pleasant experience to shoot, and you don't really sacrifice a whole lot other than really size, I guess, and I guess if you're really, really beating it up, durability, at least on a handgun. That said, if I had to put one as a piggyback optic on, say, an LPVO, my number one would still be the RCR. However, I would definitely be torn between the RMR and the SRO. At the 12 o'clock position on top of the LPVO, I'd go with the RMR. I think you're more likely to need the durability, at least on a rifle, and I think that the RMR provides that. However, if you had sort of like an offset, maybe a 45 off the top of your receiver, and you were going to use that for night vision, I think you'd be at a good point to go with an SRO, and especially because they're all sort of comparable pricing. The RMR and the SRO, generally, if you know where to look, you can find them with about a 50-ish dollar difference between the two of them. And then the RCR is a bit trickier to sort of line up, trying to get a sale and doing it while a rebate's going on. It's a little trickier to do, but I think you absolutely get what you pay for. If I was starting from scratch, like day one, just like buy a new handgun to carry, probably go with, say, like a Glock 45 or Glock 49 RCR, and then the Surefire X300 weapon light, call it a day. I think that entire package would probably run you, because I mean your handgun's probably about $500-600. Your optic, if you get on sale, is another $600, we'll say, and the light's about $300. So you're looking at $1,500 for a single gun. However, I think you'd be hard pressed to get anything other than, like, get something better than that in terms of like how much trust you would have in your weapon system, and that reliability is huge. Like that peace of mind, knowing that what you have, your equipment's always going to work, or at least it will work in more adverse settings, I think is pretty neat. So to close it out, I appreciate you watching, especially if you got all this way into the video. If you could like, comment, that helps me. I like answering comments. There's some funny ones. I like talking to you guys. I think it's kind of cool. Yeah, thank you very much. Have a good one.